Hey everyone, Liz Miller with Constellation Research. I am back for another CX Convo. You guys know that I love having these, and more to the point, I love having them with smart people who not only know CX, but know their stuff in technology. And today, I'm joined by SAP's very own guru of CX solutions. Is that the right title, Nitin? Is that what we're going with now? Guru of CX?
That's a bit aspirational, but
man,
since Liz, you've endorsed me on that, I'll take it.
We're just gonna go with it. We're gonna go with it. Listen, the reason why I was really excited to have this conversation with you is that you and I have been around this big amorphous bubble called CX. I feel like we now need like an echo machine that goes after that, like CX.
Into the metaverse.
Yeah, into the metaverse. Like let's go with strategy and tools, and it's all this stuff. And and we've now hit this stage where we are seeing a whole lot of chaos in this space because we've got this kind of traditional mindset of like, we've got campaigns, we're going to go and execute all these things. We've got numbers and operations and automations that we've got this old school reality of how our businesses grow and how our businesses engage with our customers. And then we have this whole new set of expectations that are being driven by our customers and from our customers of like, I don't want to do that. I want to self-serve. I want to be able to call you in the middle of the night. I don't ever want to talk to a sales rep. I want to do this. I want to build it my own, right? I want to configure everything at the middle of the night. And then tomorrow morning, you're going to say, of course I can buy that. So we're in this crazy space. And there are a lot of people getting into this space. There are even more people getting out of this space. And you and I have been able to talk about this before. But SAP, 50 years, understands data probably better. Data to the very foundation of how it is organized. Knows data probably better than anyone else out there. Yet when it comes to CX, there's been a little bit of a bumpy journey. I don't want to candy coat this. I don't know how to say it any better. But, it kind of started as a couple tools that could help your customers. Certainly started as CRM, which is a great place to start. But it has evolved. The platform evolved. The platform evolved through acquisition and some really smart acquisitions. But there's also a lot of rumor out there. There's a lot of misperceptions around, they've walked away from the portfolio. There's no more CX. They've done this. They've done that. So I wanted to do this. I was so glad that you agreed to join me here in the hot seat because I want to take a few minutes to let's just address that stuff head on if you're up for it. So I'm just going to jump into the deep end of the pool. Not everyone, when they think of customer experience delivery and customer experience strategy, necessarily knows to think of SAP. I think large enterprises think of SAP for a lot of other things that are mission critical to their businesses. But CX might not be one of those things that is yet implanted in people's mind. So let's start with a totally blank page. So if you were to outline to me, what is CX at SAP today? Who is SAP CX? What is it? What are you guys delivering? How should I think of you?
So I think it's a great question. And, for me, I've just crossed my 2-year anniversary here. And,
nice.
Arriving 2 years ago, I had a bit of a sense that SAP's CRM to CX journey was uneven. When I got here, what I saw, I felt like a kid in a candy store. I said, we're here to complete the sentence. Yeah, we're here to complete the sentence. The fact is that, for 50 years, SAP has marched on what I would refer to as Peter Drucker's, definition of the sole purpose of an organization to create the customer. And then we later modified it and said, well, it's create and keep a customer. Well, the create and keep part are the end extensions of an organization. And SAP has diligently been building through CRM and through the eras of CX, through acquisition, but also internally, all of the components that make that work. I think that at times we've struggled to articulate that to the market, but we are definitely an integral part of the SAP portfolio, the future, and we actually think about it bigger than the way that the world of CX is perceived. It's, as Liz, as you know, my foundational background is customer service, right? I really care about that. And my standard conversation there is that, customer service is no longer an activity confined to a department. And if you think about that, that requires you to think beyond CRM, which I refer to as customer records management. It's an activity login. It's a concept.
Yes.
It's not work getting done. And really thinking about how the work gets done so that customer gets the value that they expect at the point of experience, right? And so our approach to CX has been that. It's been to complete the sentence. It's about making sure that the value is provided to the customer at the point of need as efficiently, effectively, and profitably as possible.
I love that background, and so thank you for that, because I think that a lot of times when we start to think about how we finish that sentence, I think that's such a great way to put it. A lot of times when you think about CX or someone shouts out CX, they're thinking about a tool or a function. And that is neither a sentence nor a complete thought, right? When the business looks at the experiences and the compilation of experiences of their customers, they're looking at all those points of engagement, all those little moments from my package was wrong or I ordered the wrong thing to, how do I want to move this? And the time and the scale shifts. So, sentences can be long or sentences can be short, but they always have to have a period or some form of punctuation. Yeah. So to take on that challenge of finishing the sentence, that's a big bite that SAP is wanting to take. I like it. It's ambitious.
And I think, as we've talked about before, right, this notion that each one of those interactions is a point of co-creation, right? It's a point of co-value creation.
Yes.
Customers walk away receiving either support or additional renewal, replenishment, whatnot. Organizations get intelligence from it, and for us sitting in the broad SAP portfolio, we have the right to drive what I would call contextual interactions, because more often than not, whatever a customer issue or exception arises at a point of experience, we have the source. We have the source data, but it's not just the data.
Yeah.
Where the source data was created and the process it was created, and in other words, we can drive greater context at the point of experience than just about anybody else natively.
Yeah. I love that's such an important point, because I think it's a point that gets overlooked a lot, right? Because you have the data that can solve the actual problem, not the issue at hand. And I think in a lot of service engagements, we tend to focus in on the service at hand, usually being that person just rage screamed agent into my phone call, right? Like that person sitting there so frustrated with an operational process that we stuck in front of them, that we're neither delivering value nor are we solving the real problem. So I love that it's that bigger mindset. But okay, so let me just take a step back though. And I'm just going to be like the mean devil's advocate. We've been friends a long time, so you know that you're not going to take.
I bring it on.
So here's the good part. You brought up the word intelligence, and I want to double tap on that, because I know that one of the things that I heard a lot, even at Sapphire, it's a lot of the things that I hear in ongoing conversations with the team. And this is everyone from, what is happening on cloud, what is happening on, the business technology platform, or BTP, as everyone calls it internally. Like, no matter where from SAP we're talking about, this kind of concept of intelligence, the intelligent CX starts to bubble up. So I'm just going to be the devil's advocate. I've heard that theme from SAP before. I've heard this song. You've tried to get me to sing karaoke to it. I've heard it since Hybris, right? With the CX portfolio. We heard it with all the onboarding. So why is this different now? Like, what makes, is what's different? Because I have a hypothesis. Is what's different that we now have not only the structure of data, you have all of this back end, the source of where these interactions and these engagements are fulfilled, are managed, are actually happening. But now at SAP, you actually have this thing. You actually have this business technology platform that brings it all together. So it's almost like you have like a bidirectional suction cup, right? It's holding all of your ERP stuff and all that traditional SAP goodness, but then it's also pulling in all this stuff from CX. Is that the difference? Like, is that what makes me believe that this round of intelligent CX, that this is really what's going to move the needle for me as a business?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting point. I think that in many ways the term intelligent, capital I, was overused. It really is a function of lowercase I being infused across the platform. It's the little things that make intelligent, that make decisions at scale, right? So there's different ways of looking at intelligence. One way is to say wherever there is, I look at, broadly speaking, wherever there's a massive disconnect of volume incoming to make a decision and a decision that needs to be made is a great place to infuse intelligence. So this is where you can route query more effectively and efficiently. It's also about, because you have access to the source data, understanding the context of an interaction in a way that most CRM and CX technologies require elaborate integration to. And I think that's the big difference, right? And I look at that and I say, lots of things get hyped and you have to deal with the hype, right? We were earlier talking about metaverse and, we might get that today, we've got some later conversation. That there is something there, it's real. And it doesn't require you to have, an avatar without legs, that there is
$1 billion goggles and a fencing field out in front of your house.
I am looking forward to what Apple produces, and I might actually, if I can get in, I may buy one, right? But when you think about machine learning and AI, almost 20 years ago, in customer service, we were doing this thing called case-based reasoning, and it was really neural engines operating, trying to understand based off of static knowledge on the back end what might be the logical answer. Well, what we know today is that almost across the board, there's not a single product that ships that remains static. Everything is always changing. I refer to it as a perpetual newness. You wake up in the morning, your headset has been updated with new firmware. Your car is being updated. That requires a different level of dynamic thinking. Now, the arrival of GPU processing has made what we thought about as case-based reasoning now move into real-time capabilities, and therefore have access to all this data, combine it all together to make those decisions possible. And that's really, I think at the heart of what SAP has been doing with Business Technology Platform, BTP, is been to enable that. Not just enable across the portfolio that I love, which is CX, but it's also for SuccessFactors and HXM. It's also for ERP. Now, because we all sit together, woven together on BTP, we can take full advantage of that. So I can now, in a sales mode, for example, inform a seller to maybe not sell something that's not sitting in a warehouse, because I know what that is, what's in the warehouse.
Right.
And actually get their number by what's sitting in the warehouse. There's information that we have natural access to that would probably not fall into traditional CX definition. We extend this in the same way when I say that service is no longer activity confined to a department, because no customer, when they interact with the organization, wants to be exposed to the complexity of that organization.
Right. And no customer is like, are you on BTP?
Yeah, they don't care about that.
They just want to know that they get their headphones, right? They just want to know they get their headphones.
And we've seen this, right? This is when you call in. So it's a classic example of the conversation we've had here, inside of SAP is invoicing a CX issue or an ERP issue? Well, for a customer, they don't. I have an answer. They don't care. Right? Yeah. They want it resolved. And really, when you infuse little I intelligence, machine learning into the steps along the way, it supercharges the resolution time and also infuses in almost tacit knowledge within the process.
Yeah. What I really like about what we're talking about here is that I think that for a very long time within the customer experience strategy space, we have really been unintentionally confined about how we can even define context, right? Context has really been about what was the last action? What were the 5 events that we can string together and correlate into what the next, but what you're talking about is context of both the business and the market and the people all coming together. So like, you talk about the ultimate string through of context in service. When we talk about, okay, we're going to do smart routing, we're going to do intelligent routing of calls so we can get calls to the right agent. When we've been doing that, let's be honest, it's been the agent who has availability and isn't about to burn out, right?
Exactly.
Like, we can take the moments of context that we have readily available in our siloed ecosystem. But what if context is, actually, I'm going to get them to the agent who in the last 700 calls has shown that they have learned 10 new skills and subjects, has handled these calls so well, and thanks to my knowledge out of success factors, I know that this person has a high motivation to deal with more of these calls because they're up for a promotion. Like, it starts to like allow you to redefine context of that one call, and that's a huge differentiator. Like, that's a big leap forward for a lot of these organizations that have a second to make a differentiation. Like, they have 1 second to make that context known.
Exactly, and I think this is why I said I felt like a kid in a candy store coming to SAP.
Yeah.
What I've noticed though, and this is a challenge that that we have to work through, is the practical process of selling CX still goes to line of business decision makers who are motivated oftentimes by, let's be honest, tactical decisions. They need to replace a service system or a marketing system. I think as we start to educate, and not just us, the fact is, I think broadly defined, the enterprise software space is starting to recognize that the optimization for a department is reached the point where there's only incremental gain. The next layer of innovation that's arriving is driven technologically by microservices and various other things, but this notion that departmental thinking is very much based off of the industrial era. And the knowledge era arrived with Peter Drucker in 1959, yet we're still only starting to recognize what that meant, right? That you can't mechanize things by departments holistically, because that creates all kinds of gaps as well, right?
But is that also part of the reason why at SAP, because I know one of the things that you were part of and a lot of the other teams and Ritu and everybody across the CX platform, and I know it's one of the things that was really important even for your board and senior executives at SAP, was that you got a little out of those weeds of functional tools for functional things. And one of the things that you guys did was kind of make the decision of, okay, sales, service, we have lots of people who think of this as a candy shop. What could we do if we stripped it down to day zero? So you guys fundamentally rebuilt sales and service, but you also have made some pretty intentional kind of engineering, I would say, and architectural changes and mindset shifts across everything, whether it's, marketing, commerce, kind of everything across the CX portfolio. Is that kind of part of the reason why that happened? Because that was a really hard decision to make, to be like, we're going to rebuild this, but we're also going to open up all this other stuff. That could have been a real risk. Was that part of the reason of like, hey, we can't think in this old mindset anymore?
So when the critical decision was made, it predates me, so somebody else had to make the hard decision. But when you go back and you talk to those folks, Sanjit Mal being, anchor on the engineering side, my peer and friend, it really came down to several challenges. One was pure performance, right? In a world, so let's step back and talk about, let's not dance around the specifics of technology. What we did with cloud service is, we built it on a cloud native stack with a microservices architecture where what I would call the atomic objects have their own database, so they can be spun up and spun down in requirement, which actually drives to greater performance on the front end, which is a challenge at times, right? And we've solved that. But the added advantage of when you deconstruct an opportunity and a case, as opposed to having them all in their own database, is that now you can call that service in other applications, in other areas. We can now tilt toward an industry and not have to take a monolithic thing and kind of reconstruct it and just take it out that are relevant for that industry and build for that industry. That's one, that's another advantage that we've got. I think when we factor that in, it also plays to BTP. The fact is that this is all built because business technology platform, is a future-looking, fabric. Additionally, a narrative of traditional, I joked before about CRM as being customer records management. Has historically largely been reactive, right? In order to really power experience, you have to go on offense. But when you have a microservices architecture, you can deliver innovations on a daily basis. You can, drive feedback, on a daily basis as well. In many ways, the consumer world, the world that Instagram and Gmail and others work on, enterprise software is now getting aligned with that. I think we're ahead of the curve. It doesn't mean it'll take some time for our competitors to get there, but we got there because really critical decisions had to be made about the next 50 years, right? 50 years. Where's the world going?
That's so interesting. I mean, but okay, let's also tackle this one. I'm just gonna grab this bull by the horns. Microservices. Yep. I think listen, a lot of people will talk about it like it's this amazing, oh my God, it's gonna solve all the problems. And yes, I mean, scale. You could talk about resilience. You could talk about the accelerated time to market, accelerated time to value. You're constantly delivering. You're constantly innovating. And then, then there's the other side of microservices that people tend to not want to talk about, which is, they're not exactly, a microservices environment isn't exactly cheap upfront, right? So you've got a lot of upfront costs. You have a lot of complexity, or you could have a lot of complexity. I think that when you walk into it with an intentional strategy, it's a very different conversation. But I think that there are a lot of IT organizations out there that are grappling with CX, that have been burned in the initial early days of microservices without durability of strategy, right? We just let's let the devs do whatever they want, right? All of a sudden you're like, I have no orchestration of any of these layers. So there are a lot of these amazing benefits of it, but how have you guys been able to kind of keep some of the concerns about the pitfalls that I think as an industry, a lot of folks in technology are really beginning to want to tackle? How have you kept some of those pitfalls at bay?
So I think, I don't know if you had a chance to read the article that the Amazon AWS team wrote. I forget which one of their big services where they actually reverted back from microservices to more monolithic architecture. And one of the great thinkers in our space, David Heinemeier Hansen, said, "Hey, guess what? Be careful." I read it and I was like, that's a very good caution, point of caution.
Caution, yeah.
Here's the thing: microservices are important because of what they provide, which is stability and speed. I think it's still ultimately the one thing that the microservice concept does is it removes business logic from the data architecture, because that's classic CRM.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it frees up those systems to do what they do. They capture information. And it pushes business logic to the execution layer. So, and as SAP, our expertise is at the business logic process execution. That's what we're delivering. We're delivering that on a hyperscaler, hyper-performant, underneath layer. By the way, those are now accessible because they're not woven together with inner joins and outer joins that you won't understand. Right? And you're free to go after them. And we've built around that, our SAP build low-code, no-code technologies, so you can go access them if you want to. But we still have applications, and people still are going to consume for the foreseeable future, a sales cloud, a service cloud. But because we're building for the next iteration, the next generation, having that infrastructure gives us the flexibility now to tune in a specific sales cloud for, let's say, consumer products. And it's not repainting the house. It's actually something different, right?
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
That's where we're headed, right?
That's really, that's so interesting. And I think it's really about, listen, if I'm being honest, I'm just going to have that on, like the moment of honesty when when a lot of folks either talk about or think about SAP, we think about it as like one thing, like the entry point to which we knew or we were introduced to SAP. And so if you were introduced to SAP through ERP, that's where you're living, right? Like that's where you're staying. If you were introduced to SAP through CRM, through CX, through like, hey, listen, there are people who were introduced to SAP when SAP acquired Calendus Cloud, right? Like there's a lot of different entry points, right, into this ecosystem and into this portfolio. But I think at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is SAP, I remember it was like the virtual Sapphire a couple of years back when Christian Klein, the CEO, your CEO, first said, like, listen, we admit it, we get it, we haven't always been developer friendly. So we're going to go figure, like, we need to put the work in to figure this out. And so everything that I'm hearing you talk about now about the delivery of CX, I think that really is that extension of that moment in time where it was like that. It was like there's a line drawn of saying, okay, like here was our pre-days of where we were structurally. We've got to bring these developers in so that this decoupled environment and this decoupled era that we're going to live in, where our data and our applications are going to live in these areas and be decoupled from one another so that they can accelerate, so that they can move faster. It's like I always joke that it's like we're going through the great decoupling, where it's like that's the new thing.
I think the pendulum swings, right? I mean, the fact is the pendulum has started to swing, and honestly, I think the word of caution was Amazon coming to terms on certain aspects. Microservices are not the right at the core level, are not the right approach. They need to go back to a more monolithic approach, and it's great to have the hyperscalers pushing innovation in a way that provides compute for any type of decision that you need, right? And honestly, we're not 100% tied to even microservices. The fact is that what we are very good at SAP historically, and what we want to carry forward is to complete that sentence, is to execute that process in such a way that maximizes the co-creation for a customer and the organization that they engage with. And the other point that I made before is that I don't know of a single customer that ever really wants to know the complexity of the organization they deal with.
Right.
And so why expose that? Why say, well, billing is billing department? No, actually, I'm connecting with you. You should actually have. I
just want an easy button, dang it.
Right. And so that's where we're taking the direction on all of CX. Right.
Okay. Lightning round questions to wrap us up, my friend. Okay. Here we go. AI, hype or happening?
Oh, it's happening. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Metaverse, hype or happening?
Same thing. Now, on both of those questions, I want to interrupt AI. It's really machine learning, right? AI is somewhat of a Hollywood term, right? But it's machine learning.
You mean Hal's not going to open up the pod bay doors because he knew how to read lips with Frank and Dave? Come on, Nitin.
I want C3PO. I want my real.
Right.
I want Hal, right? So let's build towards C3PO, right? The translator assistant, But I think the metaverse has been real for quite some time, and it's a mix of virtual and augmented reality, and it's now arriving in the in the lunch bucket crowd.
Oh yeah, least sexy place in the universe. Least sexy place. I love
That's
it.
right. I mean, faster than it is amongst us who we don't carry lunch buckets, right? We do this stuff on computers. But if you are in the field service world, you've seen elements of it arrive.
You're in it.
And it's here. Yeah. And
you're going to work in the metaverse every day. And it's fun to watch. It's fun to see. Worst experience you've had recently that you can share? Like what's like one of the worst customer experiences you've had recently?
Everybody has awesome airline.
Let me guess, was it an airline? Exactly. Yeah, it's obviously with an airline, Liz. What question was that?
So here's where technology is astonishingly good, but again, completing the sentence matters, right? So as we've seen, the arrival of chats and chatbots and asynchronous messaging, and there's really great capabilities there. Many of them have started to integrate into, and I'm, full disclosure, I'm an Apple guy, right? So into iMessage in the branded experience. So instead of waiting in line, I had to delay at airport and actually fly. I had to eventually stay overnight. In a location. I won't expose the location because it'll expose the hub of that airline. But as I'm waiting in line, I said, I'll jump on and I'll chat, and it pivots into the branded experience. And the first chatbot interaction was fantastic. It was like, they contextually understood based off of the base information. Oh, we see your flight's been canceled. Let's work on it. But then it timed out.
No.
And I said, but the whole notion is that this is not a chat bot, that this is asynchronous messaging, that while I'm waiting, you should be continuing on. So I had to re-enter my information. And I'm slowly progressing in the line. And then I get to the end of the line, they say, well, there's no hotels in the region now. And I was like, whatever, give me a cot, then I'll just hang out for a while.
Right, or I'll sleep in the car. Yeah, oh my gosh.
No, I think it's the rush to deploy without the full understanding of what you've done. Because now I feel worse about this, and it's not the airline that I use the most, but it's
you have a worse experience when you walked out of it. They completed the sentence completely incorrectly, right? Okay, last question for you. Book recommendation, because you are an avid, voracious reader. So what's your book recommendation for everyone watching?
So I think of late, it should be required reading is Chip Wars. And
Chip Wars, I like that.
And it's on many levels. I think the most fascinating part is the geopolitical side. So the backstory for those that aren't watching is obviously we went through in the pandemic this notion of chip shortages and all of that stuff, and really nobody thinks about where the microprocessor is built and how it's built.
Right.
And what you when you read in this is the history of, and I literally live 2 blocks from the intersection of Middlefield and Wisman, where Fairchild Semiconductor was founded.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to read. Like I'm walking past this place, which is now a gas station. That's sad, but whatever. Is how this industry that started 2 blocks from where I live has become this interweb of technologies, wild thinkers, and politics.
Right.
And why it matters now. Just fascinating read. And it actually gave me a better sense of where we need to go. Not only in our day jobs, but also just as a society. Like, where is this all headed? I mentioned as we've spoken before about, I think we're still at the early days of technology. We're still at the single cell CPU, right? I mean, it's not
totally
it's not that's expanded well beyond that. And GPUs are the first real rise of a different way of computing at scale. And then NVIDIA stock price will prove that, right? But I think there's even more coming, right? And really what you get exposed to is the back history of that. Like, I would love to see that book turn into a movie, because I think it'd be a fascinating movie, dude.
It'd be so good. So good. Nitin, thanks for spending all this time with me, man. It's been great talking to you, and thanks so much for giving me the backstory. I really appreciate it. It's been another CRCX Convos. To tune back. This is going to be part of a series, so keep coming back for more, everyone.
Thank you.